The mechanics of good health work like this. The mind, our minds flow out through our senses, through our five senses. They flow out to the objects of the senses, right? I see it, I smell it, I taste it, I touch it, right? I smell it, So I hear it, I hear the box of tissues. Mind flows through the senses to the objects of the senses. Then there's a union with the actual situation. This is good health. If my mind flows out to this tissue box, let's say, and I just, without thinking, without analyzing, I directly ascertain that it's a tissue box, right? If I don't emotionally react like, oh, there it is, I was looking for you for so long, now I get all emotional. Or if I don't get into a story about it, oh, this reminds me of yesterday when my wife threw this at me in a fit of anger. Not that she would ever do that. Then I'm imputing onto it, right? I'm reacting to it emotionally, right? Defending the story, the self-story about it, and interpreting and imputing on it and conflating it. It's just a box of tissues. So if my mind flows out through the senses to the object, makes contact with that, and there's fusion of the mind and the object without interpretation, without conflation, without confusion, without imputation, any of that, then that will give me the basis for good health, actually. You say, why? Really? Yeah, really. Because the mind is at the base of all of our health. Sure, the environment impacts us now like it never did before, but all other things equal, all other factors equal, mind is most important for health. The most powerful determiner of your health is your mind. Now, good health is just like that. Let's describe how it should be moment to moment. Your mind should just flow through the senses to the objects, not windy like helter-skelter, seeing a million things, trying to experience everything in a relaxed, calm way with the wind seated in the heart very nicely. Spirit is nice and calm. And your mind looks over, I'm looking at one of the deities, paintings over here, beautiful painting on the wall of the center here. And it just has to see the painting. I don't need to think about it. I can if I want, as long as I'm aware that I'm thinking about it, then I'll maintain a better state of health. But I don't need to get carried away and have that painting remind me of my grandma. There's an old lady, a deity who's an old lady. Oh, it reminds me of my grandma. Yeah, she used to do the same thing. Boy, I wonder how grandma is now. Oh, she died. What bardo is she in? And your mind goes like this. But instead, in good health, if our mind flows out to an object, just rest there as long as it is there naturally, and then another one. And thinking is only used when thinking is needed. If you are the controller behind the thinking, then this is really great. And you can use an example from the Bhagavad Gita for this. I'm not big on using text, but it's such a beautiful example. And most people know the Bhagavad Gita, so might as well use this example. Arjuna, the great warrior, going out to battle in his chariot. He's leading a chariot that has 5 horses, right? Some say 10, the inner and outer senses, but it doesn't matter. It's the 5 senses, the 5 elements are the horses, white horses, right? And the white has significance too. And he is in the chariot, he's controlling, he's the fighter, right? And he's asked Krishna, Lord Krishna, who's supposed to be like the emanation of essence itself, of God itself, sitting in the chariot with him to be his guru and to be his driver. So that's what we really want. We want the mind to be clear like Krishna. In other words, to be abiding in our essence, controlling with the reins, the 5 horses of the senses, the 5 horses of the 5 elements, as we go about the battle of life, right? Because that's what that story is about, how life is a battlefield of doing good in a place where it's hard to do good, this earth. So if we have that, the mind sitting in its essence, flowing through the senses to the objects, we are going to be far healthier than if we don't, far healthier. I would say just being around this earth long enough to watch people I know alive die, go through disease process, look at their minds and so on, and relate it to their disease process and death, I'd have to say it gives you 10, 20 more years at least when you do mind training. So how can we get this way of connecting to the objects of senses without too much analysis or imputation, interpretation, etc., emotional reaction, which is a big thing that ruins our health, right? Well, we have to do mind training. We have to take the path of yoga. We have to learn correct view. View training is essential for this. We have to understand the reality. What is reality? Otherwise, we're always reacting to reality, confused by reality, surprised when things happen that we shouldn't be, that we weren't expecting. So anyway, or we're born very sattvasar. We can be born in Ayurveda, what's called sattvasar. Very, very calm-minded, very calm spirit, very beautiful person. It's kind of rare, pretty rare. Better we have mind training, you know, and take one of the 5 ways of Trikomasita Yoga and get correct view. And then we can have this. And I tell you that with all, I can promise this, that if you go deep into one of the 5 ways and you're really transforming your character and your mind, you are going to live longer and you're going to be healthier than if you didn't. That's a fact. Plain and simple. Even if you keep your food the same, job the same, where you live, relationship the same, all same factors, okay? Okay. Also, the Mind of Shiva retreat that we run every year is probably the best immersion into this understanding of how to do this without having to take a long, protracted, like the way of meditation, one of the 5 ways. If you just want to come and get a quick start, come to the Mind of Shiva retreat. We usually run in the fall every year. You can see it on the events. That is a great way to go and understand your mind directly by working directly with it in all of its different functions and then learning how to dissolve it back into its base essence, right? So I recommend that for that reason. Then it isn't enough for me just to look at and, you know, be in connection to that tissue box. The next step is I have to make appropriate choice, okay? I have to choose appropriately what I want to do and have an appropriate response flow from that choice. We could say, oh, I'm just going spontaneous, man. I'm just flowing with it. Yeah, that's not really true. Only enlightened beings, extremely enlightened beings, respond naturally to impulses that arise without any conditioning. When we say we're flowing with everything, we're going intuitionally, et cetera, it means that we're not putting up big resistance and that we're kind of being more sensitive to what might be appropriate, but still the choice of what's appropriate and what arises as an opportunity. This is important to understand. The choice of what's appropriate to do in a moment, what you'll do in that moment, and the opportunities to make that choice, and the opportunity that creates the field of what you'll do in that choice. This is all karmic still. That we're not thinking we're creating it doesn't mean it's intuition. Doesn't mean it's not karma. It's still coming out of our karmic base. Until the karmic base is empty, none of us are free to choose like this as essence itself, as the base nature of mind itself. We're all functioning from karma. This is why it's so important to choose, to be actively, consciously choosing and not say, oh, I'm just going with the flow, man, I'm doing whatever, because you're abdicating your own basic intelligence and you're dulling your fire element and its more subtle form called tejas, which we'll be talking about later, which is extremely important for enlightenment practice and wisdom, okay? So we have to make a decision based on clarity at that point, once we connect to the objects of senses, and then act out of that in an appropriate way for us that will create benefit for us and the whole planet. That's following our nadi. That's a very important thing to do. This is what produces health, okay, no matter what the other factors are. So in summary, we can say a clear mind, an appropriate response, good conduct creates health. Clear mind that can adhere to the objects clearly and simply, and appropriate choices and conduct that flows from that creates health. This is the old ancient Ayurveda way of understanding health, and it still stands till today as the best way to understand health in this human body before we become a Mahasiddha, right? If I'm walking through walls, I don't need any of these rules anymore. But the funny thing is, here's what's really funny. If I am walking through walls, no longer eating, drinking, pooping, breathing, needing any of that stuff, guess what? I'm now still an exemplar of the principles of Ayurveda. Very interesting, just at a very high and refined level. Ayurveda became necessary as a system because we don't keep impeccable conduct of body, speech, and mind. So because the ancient sages saw that humans find it very difficult to just drop all their karma and be a jivanamukta, a realized being, Ayurveda became a science that was very important to pursue and learn. That's why it's there as a medical science, right? As a way to adjust our health. There's a concept that you should know this term. It's a great term. Prajna aparadha. Prajna aparadha. When you put it together into one word, these two words, prajna aparadha. And prajna means wisdom, like the highest, most subtle wisdom. And aparadha means like a crime. So what it's saying is that when we don't follow what is natural, what arises naturally, appropriately from our inner wisdom, we have to have inner wisdom first, right? But when we don't follow that inner wisdom and make a choice and an action that will increase our health and longevity and benefit all beings, then we are said to be performing a pragya paradha, a crime against the wisdom of nature. And that's what we want to cut down on, right? So Trika Mahasiddha Yoga and Tantra in general teaches that the sense gates can be conditioned. They can become conditioned. And because of that, the mind doesn't even receive the correct input from the beginning of the process. So it is possible that when I'm seeing this tissue box, I'm really not seeing just a tissue box. And the sense gates themselves are conditioned. My visual is conditioned, my sense of smell, my touch, everything. Of course, we get conditioned. So in Trikamasiddha Yoga, forget about the neurology, but in Trikamasiddha Yoga, we would say the sense gates themselves are being conditioned. There are goddesses in each one of the senses, symbolic of the sense having its own sentient nature. And the senses are a live part of us, part of our awareness field. So they're sentient to some degree, you know, they're aware. So they can be conditioned though, because they're in this temporal world. And we really want to recondition the senses, because it may be that we're not even receiving the information from the world correctly, even when we put our senses upon the world. Like a simple example can be that if 5 different people observe, well, there's that story, ancient story about the elephant, right? So 5 blind people are feeling the elephant. One has the ears and says it's a giant banana leaf, you know. One has the belly and says it's a giant rock. One has the leg and says, no, it's a big coconut tree, you know. One has the tail and said, oh, I found some rope. I forget what the other one's doing. So, you know, it's that kind of idea that we all have such really strongly conditioned perceptions, that these perceptions flow out through our mind and create our world, quite literally. That is true on 2 levels. Psychologically, it's true. Or on the temporal world, it's true. But also on the spiritual world, it's true as well. We lock ourselves in through a flow of consciousness that actually literally creates. In Trika Mahasiddha Yoga, we say the mind literally creates your world. And when it retracts from all that and the 5 elements dissipate, you attain a rainbow light body. Personally, I would think of rainbow light body from Ayurvedic perspective as the highest stage of healing, highest stage of self-healing. And that's why when I run the training called light body healing, we call it light body healing, because we want to go for a light body and we want to help people get a light body as well. And of course, it's not really a goal. It happens or it doesn't based on your own fate, but heading in that direction makes us very healthy. The sense gates can be organically dysfunctional, like a central nervous system problem. And then you can't help it. There's nothing you can do. There's a woman I know who can't smell. She just doesn't have that capacity. So she misses the whole world of smell. If she was a dog, she'd be kind of blind, because dogs are like 80% smell in their world, right? That's how they see their world, experience their world. So you can have a sense problem that's organic dysfunction, or your senses can be conditioned by, I have some examples like porn. Porn conditions people, and it's very rife today. That's why I'm going to mention it a lot. It's too much. And a spiritual teacher I know advised his students who are doing sexual practice that if they can't feel enough sexual energy, they should watch porn. And I thought that's kind of a bad idea to do as a regular practice. I mean, he doesn't want them to get stuck on it. He wants them to use it to get started and then give up the practice in the future. But I wouldn't even recommend it to people, because I wouldn't want them to get that in their head if it's already there, because most people watch it anyway. So our senses can be conditioned in a negative way to limit our perception of what's real, our actual situation, through things like porn, video games. I noticed that my children speak like YouTubers and speak like the video games they watch, in very short clips, very quickly, very scattered, hard to form long, beautiful sentences, hard to then, of course, get their mind to form long, beautiful thoughts, right? Because your language creates your mind creates your language. So it's a tough one there. Strongly held beliefs such as racism or nationalism or religious fundamentalism, this can really condition your senses for sure. Oh, sure. You see in America now, in the United States, we have this big race war about to start. You have so much racism. Every day on Facebook, I see people posting more and more videos, current videos of racist encounters between black and white people in America, or white and Latino people, or white and Asian people. And it's disgusting, and it's rife. It's everywhere. So that racist person who sees a person of color, a white person who sees a person of color, or reverse, their senses are already tainted, right? Giving them a bad experience. Trauma as well. You know, people are traumatized by being abused as children and so forth, or they came back from the Iraq War and they're really traumatized. This also changes how we experience everything and affects our health. Iraqi war veterans, a very high percentage of them have PTSD. So it obscures the actual situation that they're living in, that people are living in, that we are living in. It prevents us from meeting that real situation as it is. And then we can't make the appropriate decision as how to act, right? So our Ayurveda starts with working with our mind and the sense gates and connecting usefully through our sensations to get to the actual situation of what is real, what is clear. Then we have control of our life. Then we can make decisions and choices. And that's great. Let's see. So sense gate purification has two-prong approach. First is follow the rules of connecting to appropriate objects until natural wisdom is reestablished. So just like I said, we're all conditioned to some degree. So because we're conditioned to some degree, the Dharma traditions and Ayurveda lay out certain rules of what we should do. And by following these rules, we will slowly begin to decondition our senses, even to the degree that we don't know they're conditioned. It'll start to unravel that conditioning, right? We may become aware of addictions when we start to do this kind of a process. Addiction just means that our senses have become so conditioned to outflow in a certain way that they then crave the object. Rather than come in contact with this microphone and interpret a certain way, when I have an addiction, I'm actually craving the microphone because the sense is already conditioned towards it, that it needs it, right? Through overexposure, et cetera, okay? The other prong of reconditioning is to follow a Dharma teaching, a Dharma tradition that teaches methods of reconditioning mind and senses. And here is the beauty of the marriage of Trika Mahasiddha Yoga and Primal Ayurveda. We understand in Primal Ayurveda and Trika Mahasiddha Yoga that we can use spiritual practices to change our perceptual lenses. We even start doing this. We cleanse. It's like taking the lemon sorbet in between different courses of a good Italian meal, right? Or the little bite of radicchio to get bitter, to cleanse your palate before your next plate of an Italian meal. We cleanse the senses. We cleanse the palate of the senses, especially by using a basic practice in our system called the exercise of centering. Preliminaries? I think it's taught in the preliminaries program. And that is crucial. That is so important. That becomes no longer an exercise, but something I try to live each moment of the day. I try to live that exercise every moment. So you do it until it becomes habit, and then that habit is cleansing and purifying your sense gates so you can actually connect to your actual situation and all the extra benefits that come after that from the practice. So I think it's important to recondition the mind and senses through a Dharma tradition as well. So the idea with Ayurveda here was to understand humans as being longing in an unbreakable relationship to nature. That there's a constant communication and reflection going on. We have to have this. We have to have, when we're like really steeped in Ayurveda, we're walking around feeling and being all day long in a sense of what is my sensation of my relationship right now with macrocosm. My microcosm is a universe to itself. We say as above, so below, right? That's in Europe and in India, same thing in Tantra. So what is that relationship in this moment? That's really cultivating Ayurveda, right? And it's one of the hallmarks of the three authentic hallmarks of a real and powerful yogic tantric yoga practice is to be constantly cultivating an awareness of your sensation. Not making a story out of it, ego structure, not making your mind spin a lot of extra mental, effort on it, but just directly, in fact, without a lot of thinking, feel and sense. How am I connecting my micro with the macro? How's my microcosm connecting to the macrocosm? How is my microcosm adapting to the macrocosmic conditions? or moving away from them because they're unfavorable at this time, or changing them and so forth. This is really what Ayurveda is about for us as spiritual practitioners more than as doctors. And this is when we get into the donut theory, right? So if you're a foreigner and English isn't your first language, a donut is a doughy type of wheat sweet. What do you call it? A dessert, a sweet. And it's round with a hole in the center, and there's all sugar and stuff on the outside. So we are basically a donut. When you walk around and when you see each other, you look at each other and you think, oh, a solid being, I'm a solid being. I'm just this chunk of thing walking around in space, bumping into other chunks of things. But on a quantum physics level and on a spiritual level, this is not true. We have an intimate connection to nature, and just like a donut, a human being has two sides to it, right? A donut, you come in through one side, out the other side. Humans are the same. We have a mouth. It goes down our digestive tract through our whole body and comes out the other end at the anus. So we're just like a donut. You could pull us inside and out, right? So we have this incredible relationship to nature that we're not considering usually in a moment-to-moment basis unless we train in Ayurveda or Tantric Yoga, Mahasiddha Yoga. Because it's important that we maintain the proper receiving of nutrition, of nourishment, of everything we need from nature, and give back properly through our wastes, which actually maintain our health as well. Proper waste is very important for health. Otherwise, we get out of harmony. And that's the beginnings of disease and decreasing longevity, and also, as we said, an obstacle for our spiritual practice. So the first thing I want you to do as an exercise is start to think about yourself as a donut all day long, or bagel, maybe you like bagels, donut or bagel, all day long. Think about yourself as a donut or a bagel, and that you're in this constant relationship with the macro. And I want you to understand that you're bringing in the environment. When you eat, you're bringing in the environment into your body to create new body and to give off wastes, right? And it's very important to really immerse yourself in this feeling, because then you're going to become so much more sensitive to your social environment, to your climate that you're in and so forth. And we'll go into this a bit when we get into environment later in the course. But start to think about yourself as a donut, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? If I feed myself poor, unclean air, unclean water, unclean food of low vitality with low nutrition content, low energy, genetically modified. If I feed myself negative emotions, I hang out with the wrong crowd, always getting that emotion. I watch the wrong thing on TV that's damaging to my psyche, like porn and stuff like that. If I'm doing it or playing too much video games, getting addicted to stuff, I really have to understand that that's going to become who I am. It's very important to understand that whatever we are taking in, right, that's going to make me, because your thoughts in your mind create your whole experience of your body. We'll get to that as well. But this starts with the whole donut theory. What are you taking into your mind? Mind is like a sponge. What are we taking in? What are we taking into our body? Body as well. Okay. Think about yourself as a donut, work with that, and we'll get back to that over and over again as we go through nutrition, et cetera. Okay. And, one word on this is that in a long time ago, one of the actual accepted ways to realization or liberation was to follow Ayurveda as a real way, to cultivate such a deep, sensitive connection to your essence, to your energies, to your mind, to your Vata, Pitta, Kapha, to your Ojas, Tejas, Prana, to your Dhatus, Doshas, all this kind of stuff, that this would be the path into self-realization. It's quite beautiful.